How many times had she been married? 5. And her current incarceration? She admitted to killing her husband. The last one? Yes. And were there others? They asked. Yes. The previous husbands? All of them. Her appearance was that of a storybook grandmother, favoring polka dot dresses, baking pies, and collecting romance clippings. Yet, concealed by that gentle facade was a profound darkness. For over 3 decades, she methodically poisoned husbands, children, and even her own mother. And through it all, she laughed. They would come to call her the Giggling Granny. This is the chronicle of how a woman's search for love became a campaign of murder, and how she evaded detection for 30 years. This is Trace the Crime. For deep investigations into unsettling cases and the psyches behind them, please like, subscribe, and enable notifications. The story of Nannie Doss began with Nancy Hazel, born on November 4, 1905, in Blue Mountain, Alabama. Her origins were decidedly humble. Born to a poor farming family as one of 5 children. Her father, James Hazel, was a tyrannical presence who governed the family with absolute authority. He removed Nannie and her siblings from school to force their labor on the farm. Their formal education ceased, and their contact with the world beyond was severely limited. Nannie turned to romantic fantasies. She lost herself in romance publications, imagining the perfect husband and an idyllic love. But her reality offered a stark contrast to these fantasies. At age 7, an event occurred that might shed light on the darkness that would follow. On a family train trip, a sudden stop slammed Nannie's head against a metal seat. She lost consciousness. In the years after, she suffered from headaches, blackouts, and severe mood swings. Whether this was a true psychological injury or a convenient excuse she would later use is still debated. In her adolescence, Nannie's obsession with finding love only deepened. She yearned for an escape from her father's control and the bleakness of her life. At 16, she saw an opportunity, marrying her first husband, Charlie Braggs, a co-worker from the local linen factory. Her father gave his blessing, likely approving of Charlie's stable background. But Nannie's grim quest had just begun. What followed was a wake of devastation, concealed by wedding vows and a pleasant demeanor. Her 1921 marriage to Charlie Braggs seemed to promise a new chapter. Together they had 4 daughters and seemed content, but the union quickly deteriorated. Charlie would later describe her as a heavy drinker with erratic behavior. She, in turn, labeled him as controlling and cold. There was likely truth on both sides, but the marriage's central point of failure may have been Charlie's mother. The couple resided with her, and Nannie reportedly loathed her domineering mother-in-law's constant meddling. As the tension inside the house grew, tragedy was soon to follow. Between 1927 and 1929, 2 of Nannie's daughters died without warning, ostensibly from food poisoning. No autopsies were conducted, no investigation was launched. In rural America at the time, such deaths were tragically common. But Charlie was suspicious. He believed Nannie was involved in the deaths of their children. By 1929, he had reached his limit. Taking their eldest daughter, Melvina, he vanished, leaving Nannie behind. His return a year later was not for a reconciliation. He had found a new partner and wanted to sever all ties. He left the children in her care, and the marriage was formally dissolved. After the divorce, Nannie appeared anxious for a fresh start and moved quickly. She began responding to Lonely Hearts advertisements, searching for her next romantic partner. In 1929, she remarried a man named Frank Harrelson. The romance began with poetic promises, but Nannie was secretly cultivating a darker skill, the use of poison. Arsenic and rat poison were her preferred tools, both easily acquired. Frank, it turned out, was an alcoholic with a criminal past. Their relationship disintegrated quickly, yet somehow lasted for 16 years. In 1945, after a night of violent, drunken assault, Nannie acted. She added rat poison to his whiskey. He was dead in days. His passing was never questioned, attributed to liver failure, a frequent diagnosis for alcoholics. Nannie claimed his insurance benefits and went on with her life. She would later say she acted in self-defense, but no police report ever existed, only her version of events, punctuated by her laugh. The death of Frank Harrelson was merely a prelude. In 1945, his widow's daughter, Melina, delivered a seemingly healthy infant son. At the hospital, Nannie was a constant, watchful presence. Melvina would later recount a horrifying vision from her anesthetic haze. Her mother, plunging a hat pin deep into her newborn's head. The infant did not survive long past his delivery. Doctors ruled the death natural, but the haunting image seared itself into Melvina's memory, and the year's tragedies were not over. There was another child, Melvina's older son, Robert. A dispute with her mother led Melvina to leave Robert with Nannie for the night. Upon her return, the child was gone. Nannie's explanation was chillingly simple. His breathing had just ceased. Melvina's suspicions deepened upon finding documents hinting at a life insurance policy Nannie had secured on the boy, fracturing their bond. That same year, 1945, the shadow of death fell again. Nannie went to stay with her sister Dovie, who was ill and helpless. Dovie's sudden passing came just days after Nannie arrived. It was deemed natural, and Nannie quickly assumed control of the arrangements. She performed the part of a devastated sibling. Then, months later, her mother Louisa Hazel arrived for a stay. The reunion appeared warm and congenial. Yet, like Dovie before her, Louisa was dead within days of Nannie's company. Once more, no inquiry was made. The possibility of murder never crossed anyone's mind. The passing of an older relative rarely prompted suspicion, particularly when explained by a seemingly heartbroken, composed daughter. Through it all, her reputation remained untarnished. She was the kind, ever-present, and smiling caregiver. Her routine involved baking, tending to the infirm, and maintaining a cheerful mask despite the constant sorrow. Behind the facade was a chilling calculus. Nannie Doss systematically erased anyone who became a burden, a disappointment, or an obstacle. The victims' relations were irrelevant spouses, children, grandchildren. Her motives were simple: convenience, quiet, and occasionally profit. The absence of inquiry was a green light to continue. With each death, Frank Harrelson, her own kin, her confidence grew. Her technique proved to be flawless, sanitary, silent, and entirely invisible to authorities. With no one to challenge her, poison became her chosen instrument. Later that year, she found her next target through a Lonely Hearts column, Arlie Lanning of North Carolina. Their marriage followed a courtship of mere days. Upon moving in, she seamlessly adopted the persona of a pious and devoted spouse. The community saw a kind, affable woman, constantly offering baked goods and a smile. Behind closed doors, a darker reality unfolded. Arlie's heavy drinking and frequent absences were an affront to Nannie. She reverted to her trusted method, secretly introducing poison to his meals. Arsenic was carefully administered in dishes like stews or soups, which effectively concealed its acrid flavor. The effects of arsenic shrewdly imitate common ailments: nausea, vomiting, severe cramping, and fatigue. The symptoms could easily be mistaken for foodborne illness or cardiac arrest, particularly in a person with pre-existing conditions. Over a period of weeks, Arlie's health steadily deteriorated. His eventual collapse and death were attributed by physicians to heart failure, a consequence of his alcoholism. The truth went undiscovered. His devoted wife, after all, had been a constant presence, baking, praying, and perpetually smiling. Shortly after the funeral, the house legally his family's property was destroyed in a suspicious fire. Nannie claimed the insurance money. Her next move was to live with and care for Arlie's aging mother. The elderly woman also perished within days. As before, there was no autopsy, no inquiry. Nannie departed for Kansas in 1952. There, she encountered her fourth husband, an upstanding Emporia local named Richard Morton. He was a man of temperate habits, the very picture of the stability she supposedly craved. It would not save him. Her discovery, just months into the marriage, was that Richard was unfaithful. In her mind, this was a profound betrayal deserving of death. She employed her signature technique, incremental doses of arsenic in his meals. The initial symptoms mimicked influenza, but his condition rapidly declined, progressing to organ failure. Richard died in under a week. Once again, authorities saw only a grieving widow, with nothing to indicate a crime had occurred. The tally now stood at 3 husbands, all dispatched with poison. Her performance as the bereaved wife was perfect every time, and medical examiners consistently ruled the deaths as natural. Time after time, she walked away unpunished. Her next victim, however, would be the one to end her deadly run. The methodology she had honed for years was finally set to fail. In 1953, a Lonely Hearts ad introduced her to Samuel Doss. On the surface, he presented as a respectable, conservative man. He was a Nazarene minister from Tulsa, grappling with the loss of his wife and child in a recent storm. Samuel sought comfort and a new beginning. Nannie, conversely, was on a quest for an idealized love. The marriage was swift, and the disillusionment immediate. Samuel's life was one of strict austerity, and he expected the same of her. Her magazines and television shows were strictly forbidden. He maintained absolute control over their finances. In her eyes, he embodied every trait she detested: dull, domineering, and void of affection. She left him, but his apologies lured her back with one specific stipulation. She demanded her name on his bank account and for him to secure 2 life insurance policies with her as sole beneficiary. In September of 1954, Samuel was struck by a mysterious and debilitating digestive ailment. He eventually recovered, convinced he had merely suffered a bad case of food poisoning, but Nannie's plan was incomplete. On October 12, 1954, another meal, this time laced with a fatal dose of arsenic, was served. What Nannie hadn't factored in was Samuel's physician, whose suspicions were already piqued from the first incident. When the minister died so soon after his release, the doctor's intuition compelled him to demand an autopsy. The toxicology report was definitive. His system was flooded with arsenic. It was a clear case of homicide. When confronted by authorities, Nannie Doss performed the role of a devastated widow until something inside her fractured. A laugh escaped her lips. The confession that followed went far beyond the murder of Samuel Doss. Over subsequent interviews, she cheerfully detailed the killings of 4 previous husbands, and then the list grew. Her own mother, her sister, 2 children, a grandson. With each session, the scale of her hidden life emerged. The capture of Nannie Doss had finally occurred, and the decades-long trail of death she left behind was finally coming into the light. For investigators, the true shock was not the extent of her crimes. It was the chillingly casual manner in which she recounted them. She exhibited no sorrow, no regret, only a placid, smiling demeanor. During her interrogation, Nannie admitted to killing 4 of her 5 husbands, offering justifications that seemed, to her, entirely reasonable. One was unfaithful, another too restrictive. One denied her television, another consumed too much alcohol. She described their final moments with a detached precision, sometimes giggling. "I was searching for the perfect mate," she explained. "He wouldn't let me read my stories, so I put rat poison in his coffee," she offered, with a small laugh. The arrest of Nannie Doss sent a shockwave across the country, less for the number of dead than for the nature of her confession. The kindly-looking woman in floral prints who baked pies had systematically murdered a minimum of 11 victims, all while smiling. In an era when serial predation was considered an exclusively male pathology, Nannie shattered every existing profile. Her acts of violence were not committed in shadowed alleyways or desolate landscapes. They unfolded at the family dinner table, inside bedrooms, on quiet front porches. Her weapon of choice was poison, a quiet, insidious method reserved for those who trusted her most. Public reaction was a volatile mix of horror and fascination. The press ran with the story, crafting sensational headlines. Reporters bestowed upon her nicknames that captured the profound dissonance between her appearance and her deeds. The Giggling Granny, the Jolly Black Widow. She seemed to relish the attention, posing for cameras with a broad grin. The media storm appeared to amplify her bizarre performance, with papers publishing smiling photos alongside timelines of her deadly marriages. Despite her confession to 11 homicides, Nannie Doss was ultimately prosecuted for only one: the murder of Samuel Doss, where Oklahoma held the most damning evidence. The state charged her with murder in the first degree. She entered a guilty plea in May of 1955. With her plea, a trial was unnecessary. The judge handed down a sentence of life imprisonment. In the 1950s, it was exceedingly rare for a woman to face the death penalty, particularly in a state like Oklahoma. There was a deep-seated reluctance within the justice system to execute women who fit a maternal, non-threatening stereotype. Nannie Doss, with her grandmotherly appearance, was the embodiment of this perception. Even with her litany of confessed killings, her placid demeanor had a disarming effect on many. She was the furthest thing from the public's image of a ruthless killer, which is precisely what she was. Officials in other jurisdictions, from North Carolina to Kansas, contemplated filing their own charges for her other murders. At the time, however, multiple prosecutions were deemed unnecessary if a suspect was already facing life without parole. The cost and complexity of interstate transfers were considered impractical, given she was no longer a public danger. The trial garnered immense media attention, but for its deeply unsettling tone. The The spectacle of a smiling grandmother calmly detailing a series of poisonings transfixed the nation. Nannie Doss would spend the next 10 years at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Even incarcerated, she maintained her unnervingly cheerful disposition. Her days were filled with romance magazines, crocheting, and a ready smile for any reporter or visitor. A prison staffer later remarked on her grandmotherly act, saying you would never suspect her true nature. But the laughter eventually faded. On June 2, 1965, Nannie Doss succumbed to leukemia inside the prison's hospital ward. She was 59 years old. No significant funeral was held. Her case receded from the headlines but never fully disappeared from the public consciousness, a chilling story of a grandmother who killed with a giggle. Even now, she stands as one of the nation's most prolific female serial killers, convicted solely on her confession without trial for most of her victims. In the end, the crimes of Nannie Doss imparted a deeply disturbing lesson. The face of a monster is not always monstrous. Sometimes it is the face of a grandmother. Sometimes it serves you a slice of pie with a smile. If this account unsettled you, please consider showing your support and subscribe for more explorations into the criminal mind. Leave your thoughts in the comments. What case do you find even more psychologically twisted than that of the Giggling Granny? Until our next investigation, remain vigilant. Thank you for watching. Model. The Chronicle of Nannie Doss is more than a dark chapter in criminal history. It is a profound cautionary tale about the fragility of trust and the deceptive nature of the ordinary. For 30 years, a trail of devastation was hidden behind a grandfatherly smile, polka dot dresses, and the warm aroma of fresh-baked pies. It reminds us that evil does not always wear a monstrous face sometimes. It wears the mask of the person we least suspect. The Giggling Granny exploited the very virtues we hold dear: caregiving, family, and faith. Her story serves as a stark call for vigilance. It teaches us that silence in the face of suspicion is a dangerous luxury. When we ignore unexplainable tragedies or overlook the suffering of the vulnerable, the children, the elderly, and the ill, we inadvertently grant darkness the room to grow. Let this be a lesson in emotional intelligence and accountability. True love preserves and protects. It does not stifle or destroy for convenience. We must foster a society where we look closer, listen deeper, and protect one another with fierce intentionality. Justice for the fallen begins with our courage to see past the facade. Remain vigilant, for the most dangerous shadows are often those cast by the light of a friendly smile.